Hey everyone, welcome to George's Library. My name is George, and today I want to talk about Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi. Persepolis is one of those books that feel very simple when you open it, and then slowly becomes more complex the more you sit with it. At first glance, the art is very minimal, black and white, very clean, almost childlike. And I remember thinking, oh, this feels very accessible. But as the story unfolds, that simplicity starts doing something really powerful. It stops being simple. It becomes precise. The book follows Marjane Satrapi's childhood during and after the Iranian Revolution. And what struck me right away is that this isn't told from a distant historical perspective. It's immediate, personal, often filtered through a child's understanding of events that are, in reality, incredibly complex. And that creates this really interesting tension. Because as a reader, you're constantly aware that what you're seeing is both true and partial. It's a child trying to make sense of ideology, war, religion, identity, things that don't easily make sense even as an adult. And that's where the book really starts to open up. At some point, I found myself curious about Satrapi herself, about why she chose to tell her story this way. And learning a little bit about her background added an extra layer to the reading experience. Satrapi grew up in Iran, but later moved to Europe, and Persepolis was originally written in French for a Western audience that had a very limited or distorted understanding of Iran. And once you know that, the tone of the book starts to make a bit more sense. There's this constant balancing at explaining without over-explaining, humanizing without simplifying, correcting misconceptions without turning the story into a lesson. And I think the choice of the graphic novel format is also part of that. The simplicity of the drawings makes the story more approachable, but it also strips things down to essentials. There's nowhere to hide. Emotions, contradictions, moments of fear or rebellion, they all land very directly. And also what I appreciated a lot is that Persepolis is not turning his narrator into a symbol. Margie isn't presented as a perfect or representative figure. She's stubborn, curious, sometimes contradictory. She makes mistakes, she misinterprets things, and the book allows that. It doesn't try to smooth her into something more digestible. And that honesty extends to how the book handles politics. This isn't a clean story of before and after or good versus bad. The revolution itself is complicated. The people around her have different beliefs, different reactions. And Satrapi doesn't try to resolve those tensions neatly. Instead, she shows how those tensions are lived inside families, inside friendships, inside a child trying to figure out who she is. There's also a really strong thread of displacement running through the book. As Margie grows older and eventually leaves Iran, the sense of not fully belonging anywhere becomes more pronounced. And that part of the story feels very quiet, but very real. It's not dramatic in the traditional sense, but it lingers. And again, knowing a little bit about Satrapi's own life, moving between cultures, writing this story from a distance, makes that emotional thread feel even more grounded. Structurally, the book is episodic. It moves through moments rather than fixating on a central plot. And I think that works in its favor. It mirrors memory. It feels like looking back and trying to piece together who you were and how you became that person. By the end, it doesn't really feel like you're reading a definitive account of a historical moment. It feels more like you've spent time inside a person's memory. And that's a very different experience. Persepolis doesn't try to overwhelm you with information or emotion. It invites you in quietly, lets you observe, and trusts you to sit with what you see. It's accessible, yes, but it's also layered, thoughtful, and deeply human. And I think what stayed with me most is that it manages to be both very specific, a story about one girl, one family, one country, and at the same time very universal in the way it explores identity, belonging, and growing up in a world that doesn't always make sense. All right, thank you everyone for watching. I hope you stay safe, be kind, and keep on reading. I'll see you next time.